rest of our time today. So I'm going to go to preventive maintenance. Preventive maintenance. And I am going to create a new PM. I'm going to use a PM must have a job plan. I know it does not show as being mandatory, but you have to have a job plan. That's what tells the PM what to do. And just like everything else, you need to tell it many things. Now, the PM needs to be associated with an asset. So I'm going to use the asset that I have been using all day. You can also use a location. I prefer to use an asset myself, but I'm trying to find my asset number written in this book. When you pick the asset, it's going to fill in the asset's description. I'm going to say this is my test for PM creation with job plan. Now, the lead time is going to tell the system how far out in advance you want this to generate. So I typically, it depends on whether it's a weekly, a monthly, an annual, what it is, but you need to get it into the system so that it is seen either by the planner or by the area coordinator and the supervisor, the maintenance supervisor. So I like to always use increments of 7 for 7 days, and this is a weekly PM. I'm going to make this a weekly PM, but I want it to generate in advance, so far enough in advance that they're going to see it. So I'm going to put 28 days on it. So 28 days from the time I say I want it to start, and we'll do that on the frequency page. 28 days ahead of that, this PM is going to generate. So I'm going to say this is a work type PM. And you have various options. You can also do PDMs. I'm going to say it's an inspection. I want the work order, when it generates, to be a priority 3. Now, let's talk about the work order status a little bit. It depends when this PM generates. If the planner is going to have to do anything at all, if they're going to have to buy parts, if they're going to have to get a service to come in and do the work, whatever the case may be, you want the PM to generate an A plan. So it goes in the planner's box, so he can then work this. If nothing needs to happen, if it just needs to go into the backlog so it goes onto the schedule, it needs to generate a waiting schedule. So I'm gonna leave mine as waiting scheduled. In this case, I'm gonna say my scheduling code is.
Carol, can you go over that again?
Absolutely. Okay, so when you think about what's going to happen when the PM generates, when the PM generates the work order, what needs to happen? If the planner is going to need to buy parts, possibly, write a requisition for a service, then it needs to come out in A plan so they can work the work order. If nothing needs to happen, if it's basically just labor and they're going to go out and do an inspection, then it can come out in waiting schedule. You really don't want to choose any other statuses than that, because the system is going to change the statuses as required. For example, if you have the PM generate a plan, then when the planner does his planning, it may go into waiting financial approval, it may go straight to waiting scheduled, it could go, waiting material. So you want to pick the status that is going to be, that you want the work order to be in when this PM generates. That makes sense?
Sarah, quiet.
Yes.
Okay, so
It took me twice to understand that one.
that's okay. It's a little confusing. I agree. All right, so I'm going to say this is anytime work, and it's important. Remember when you're doing the PM, and the same thing is true, if you were writing a work order. The scheduling code is very important because this tells the area coordinator or the maintenance supervisor, whoever's looking at the work order, this tells them how it can be done. So I'm going to say this can be done anytime, but I could say this can only be done, if an area circuit outage. So they would know that if they have that circuit down, they could do this job. If it's equipment only, they could do it they only have to take the equipment down to do it. Maybe you can only do it on a repair day when it's all down. Maybe you can only do it total plant. I'm going to choose any time for this example. So you have to have a crew work group, and I know mine is going to be 4C because that's what my job plan is. Now, let's talk about the start constraint offsets. These two numbers, and I'm going to show you what they are. Well, I don't have a way to show you, but I can send you the list, and some of you probably already have the list. There's a list that says if it's a weekly PM, it starts no earlier than 48 hours in advance or 120 hours after. So whatever the target start date is on the PM, they have 48 hours before or 120 hours after the target start date to get this done. If they stay inside that window, and I'm going to show you that window because I'm going to generate a work order from this. But this is going to be a weekly PM, so I'm going to say 48 and 120. Now, that's start no earlier than is 48 hours, and finish no later than is 120 hours. You must put these on here because what happens is there are people higher up than us that look to see if we are meeting our PM compliance. We were supposed to do it in this window. Did we do that? Or did we have to move it? So that's critical that you have that there. I've already got my job plan on there, got my crew work group. So now we're going to talk about the frequency. So I'm going to say mine is going to be 1, and I'm going to pick week because I'm going to want this to generate every week. I want it to start on 11/2. You do not have to fill in this alert lead days. You've already got the lead time on the header. Always change this time to 7. The target start time when the PM generates should be 7 a.m. Do not take off the check mark. What the check mark tells us is, right now, with the check mark on it, the next work order generates based on when the last one generated. If you remove the check mark, the next PM will not generate until you have completed the other work order. And if that work order got delayed for some reason, it's not going to generate a PM because it's saying, I'm waiting for you to complete the last one. So it is recommended you always leave the check mark here. There are some area coordinators that like theirs to come out without the check mark so they can move them. Basically, they don't get penalized because it's not generating because they haven't completed the work order yet. They haven't completed the first one. But it is recommended you always leave the check mark. Okay, so we have filled everything in. We have our asset. We have all our information here. I'm going to save it. I am going to change its status to active. And I'm going to actually generate this work order. So I have a 28-day lead time. Today is the 20th. This should generate without me having to add any additional days to it. So you can add additional days. Say I had this set at 7, and I wanted to generate 28 days out, then I would need to add a 21 here where this 0 is. But this should generate a work order based on the lead days that I have on it. When everything is good on your job plan, you fill everything out correctly on your PM, when your work orders generate, they're going to generate exactly like you want. But I'm going to show you a little trick. Oh, it created multiple work orders. Now, do you know why it did that? It's a weekly PM. So I have it set to generate weekly, and it's 28 days out. So it has generated all the work orders. One will be for, it's probably going to generate 11/2, 11/9. Let's go and look at our work orders. Look at the work orders that I just generated. So I'm looking for all the PM work orders that were generated by me today. Today is the reported date. I hate that little spinny thing. It always tells me I'm going to have to wait. Okay, so there's my 3 work orders. Because I had a 28-day lead time on it, it generated 3 work orders. One for the week of the 2nd, one for the week of the 9th, and one for the week of the 16th. In waiting scheduled status. So they are in the backlog now, and they can be scheduled. Any questions so far? There's a lot to cover in PMs, so.
Yeah, I missed this last step when you actually generate the work order.
Okay. All right, let's go find a PM. All right, so I need a PM that's going to be due. Let's take a look at this one. All right, this has a 28-day lead time on it, but it is not due until January 16th. So, in order to get this to generate, I would have to go to generate work orders, and I would have to add enough days to that 28 to get me to January 16th. I'm not going to do that because that's just way too many. It's too far out to do that. And keep in mind, PMs auto-generate. You don't have to generate them yourself. I'm just showing you how it would be done. But in the PM system, it is set up to auto-generate. It looks at the PM and it looks at everything that's due that day, and the system generates PMs every night to all the sites. They just automatically show up either in the planner's A-plan backlog or in a waiting scheduled backlog if they're ready to be scheduled. So you don't have to generate it at all. I typically do that when I'm working on my weekly PMs because I would base load them into the system, but you don't have to generate it at all. I'm just generating it so you guys can see, this is what happens and the work order generates. But I wanted you to see one other thing. I want to go back over there to work order tracking for a minute. I want to pull up those 3 work orders again because I want you to see what happens with the start no earlier than and finish no later than. Just looking for work orders that I generated today. right, so this is the one that is for November the 2nd. You'll see here at the bottom it says, we can start this job no earlier than 10:31, and we need to finish it by 11:08. That's your window to get the PM done. You see the target start is 11:02. 48 hours before that is going to be 10:31. So you have 48 hours before it and 120 hours after this target date to get this work done, to be in compliance. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? And I do have that list of codes of the start no earlier than and finish no later than that I'll be happy to send it to all of you. So you will have it. Because it is very important that you put that on your PM. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for there for a second. Alright, now, what we're going to do is, for the next, I don't know, probably at least 15 minutes, I want you guys to go to the PM module, and I want you to go to the new. Then I want you to put your job plan on the PM. You can just type it in if you know what the number is. And then fill in the rest of the PM. Fill in all the fields, the work type, the work activity, the work order status, depending on how you want the work order to generate. What priority it's going to be. Typically, all these are going to be 3s because we're not doing them as emergencies. A PM is not an emergency job. Put in the scheduling code. Make sure you fill in the crew work group right here. Then you're going to go to the frequency page, and you're going to decide, am I doing this monthly? Am I doing this, you could say every 3 months, or you say it, 1 year. Just depends on what the PM is, how you want it to generate. Then you need to pick a date, which would be the date that you want it to start. This is the day that this job is going to go onto the schedule. Make sure you change the time to 7. And then don't forget to put your lead time in here. If you leave that lead time at 0, the work order is going to generate the day it is due. So we need to get the work orders out far enough in advance that either the planner can plan them if they're coming out in a plan, or they can be added to the schedule. The area coordinator would see these waiting scheduled PMs and would then would ask them to be scheduled. Because anything that had that target start date would then be for that week. So make sure you put your lead time in here to get plenty of opportunity to either be planned or just added to the schedule. Alright, does anybody have any questions about that?
Yeah, I think I'm lost.
Okay, go ahead.
I got my asset and all that good stuff in up here and all that, but I don't see that other.
Because there are multiples here, you have to make sure you get the active one. So if a job plan has been revised, you need to actually come and find the correct one. You may get an error just typing it in. I can't say for certain, but I have seen that happen. So if you revised it, make sure that you go and get the active one. All the revised ones are no good now. And then you would just return it with value. See, it's telling me it's not a valid job plan. It wants me to pick this. Yes, it is valid. It's an active status. You've got a PM inspection. It's going to be waiting schedule when it generates. You've got this anytime work.
So what does that lead time mean?
The lead time means that's how far in advance it's going to generate. The work order is going to generate. The system is going to look at it and it's going to say, okay, he wants to do this on 11/20. So 28 days ahead of 11/20, it's going to generate this PM. So in other words, it would generate it, in a couple of days.
But when you say generate PM, it means to generate the work order, right? To do the PM?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, that's correct. Yeah. All right, you change the time, you got a good date here, and this is monthly, so again, not something you would know. This would be 672 because it's monthly. Other than that, everything looks great. All right, who else has one?
Last number 74.
374?
317374. Yes, ma'am.
It doesn't want, oh, there we go. Okay, so you have 7-day lead time. You've got a good job plan, the crew work group is filled in. Let's look at the frequency. So this is weekly, so you're going to start it on Monday the 23rd, 7 a.m. It looks good. Now just keep in mind, you got 7-day lead time on it, so this is not going to generate until November 16th. I don't know why it has a last start date on it. Unless did you generate one?
Yeah, after I've done it, I went ahead and
Oh, you
generated.
generated a work order? Okay, that's why. So what happened, guys, he generated a work order, and so it was for the 16th. You see that last start date. Now, his next due date is going to be 11/23. Looks good.
Now, with a PM like this, is it like ongoing until somebody cancels it, or how does
Yes,
it?
it's just going to keep generating. It's going to. So this is a job plan with. This is a PM with multiple job plans. So you go to the job plan sequence tab, and what you do is you're putting it, and you'll see I created 3 job plans. One is monthly, one is quarterly, and one is annual. So then you sequence them by putting the number here. So the monthly you want to generate every month. So that's a 1. But then when you get to the quarterly, you're not generating the monthly, you're generating the quarterly. So that's a 3 because the 3rd month you want it to generate the quarterly. And then of course on the 12th month you want it to generate the annual. So you can put multiple job plans on a PM to get everything done instead of having to have 3 PMs, one to do the monthlies, one to do the quarterlies, and one to do the annual. The system will then just generate whatever is due. It's going to generate 2 monthlies, and you can actually see I have this forecasted so it tells me, okay, one's going to generate, this is going to be the quarterly, because I have already generated this for the previous class. So this is going to be the quarterly, it's going to come up on 11/17. Then it's going to do 2 monthlies, going to do another quarterly. It's going to do 2 monthlies, another quarterly, and 2 more monthlies. And then the annual, I think, is next. I only forecasted it so far out. And I have already generated some of the work orders, so what would have been above this is missing. But it's really easy to do, but you have to have 3 separate job plans. And you set the job plan up as if, okay, this is everything I have to do for the month. Then the quarterly one might be, there's a few more things you have to check when you inspect on the quarterly, but you're also doing what's on the monthly. Because you still have to do the monthly, you're just not generating a separate work order for it. And then, of course, when you get to the annual, that's the really thorough PM. So that's going to have, parts of the monthly and the quarterly probably because you're doing the complete annual PM. So you just have to have 3 job plans, and then you just put them in on the job plan sequence page, and you make sure you say for example, I didn't want to do it quarterly, I only want to do it monthly. I would just have a 1, and then I would have this 12. So every month, for 11 months, it would do the monthly, And then on the 12th month, it's going to do an annual PM. The system is only going to generate the job plan that is due based on this sequence. So, my best example is air compressors, because I know they have to be checked routinely. So, I'm going to inspect my air compressor every month. But then quarterly, I'm going to inspect it, but I'm going to do just a little bit more than I do every month, because the one I do every month is not really that intense. I'm going to, check the oil, I'm going to do whatever. But then, so you do the quarterly one, then you do the monthly one a couple of times, and then, after, when you get to that 12th month, then it's going to generate the annual one. And you don't have to do anything. Once you've set this up, the system is going to do all of it for you. It's just going to generate it, whatever one is due. And right now, because the earliest next due date is 11/17, that means it's going to generate this monthly one, the quarterly one on 11/17. And I won't have to do another thing because I have it all set up, and all I have to do is just let the system do its work. Now, not everybody's going to use that. I know the reliability engineers have a tendency to use this because they're the ones who are setting up a lot of these things that are, probably monthly, quarterly, maybe even semi-annual and annual. So, if you were doing a semi-annual course, then it would be in sequence, it would be a 6. Just remember, you have 12 months, so you have either a 1 for a monthly, a 3 for a quarterly, a 6 would be semi-annual, and then of course the 12 would be the annual. Again, I don't know that all of you would be doing this, but some of you might. So just remember, you gotta have 3 job plans, or 4, depending on how many you're doing. Completely separate job plans, and then you just add the job plans. You just hit a new row, and you just put your job plan in, and you tell it what sequence you want it to be. Again, I'm not going to make you guys do it, but if anybody, gets back, to your work location, and you want to do it, and you're a little bit unsure, just give me a call, hit me on Teams or whatever. And also, there is in help, I believe there is something that talks about this. Again, I highly recommend that you look these over. This is MOS Max 76403, and it's preventive maintenance. So, can you guys see my screen still?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in this, which those of you who were in the first day, you received this PowerPoint. There is a section here that tells you about frequencies, it tells you about time-based PMs, a lot of the stuff that we didn't cover. We didn't cover meters. Somewhere here is about sequencing, and this is on slide number 31 and 32. It talks about this if you need a refresher on that. Again, I don't think it's something that everyone would be doing. Not all the planners would be doing it, at least. So, but I think the reliability engineers might be. I just wanted you to see that, in case you might have use for that. I find it useful, but there were some people who prefer to have separate PMs because of some regulatory items. So that's also something to keep in mind.
Where we're going to find that information regarding the different code for the start constraint and finish constraint?
I'm going to send it to you. It's actually a Word document. It's what is in that file that I just showed you. I'm not sure is correct, that PowerPoint, but I'm going to send you that list of what those constraints are to everyone who's on this call. For some reason, it's not, you can't, there's no drop down beside those in the PM for you to be able to pick them. And just a thought, if you were doing PM sequencing, you're always going to use the one for whatever the lowest number is. For example, monthly is the lowest number, so you would have monthly on here, and the constraints when they come out for the quarterly or the annual are still going to be the same. You pick whatever the lowest one is. In this case, it was monthly, so it would be 48 and 672. Again, always make sure that you put your lead time days in here. It's very important because that tells the system, okay, this PM is going to be due in 21 days. I need to generate it. It's going to look at this date, and it's going to look at this number. And when we get 21 days in advance of 11/17, that's when it's going to generate.
Cheryl,
I know.
Cheryl, as part of our job as an RE is to optimize the PM. So if
Right.
let's say we're going to revise the PM, if we're going to delete some of the tasks and then save it, so the system will actually print the latest revision.
Of the job plan. Of the job plan that's attached to the PM. Yes. You have to make sure. What happens is, because if there's multiple revisions, it should be pulling your latest job plan revision. This job plan, for example, has never been revised, but if I revised it, then the next time the PM generates, it's going to use the most current job plan. Did that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Yeah, it's not the PM that you would be changing, you'd be changing the job plan associated with the PM. All right, so we've covered a lot of stuff today, and there's stuff, that I put in the chat window earlier that I want you guys to review, and I'm going to send you that planner PowerPoint, and I'm going to send you the list of constraints, the hours, start no earlier than, finish no later than hours. What else? Is there anything else that, you had trouble with today that you'd like to look at again? You guys have been a really good class. Participation was very good. That makes it much easier. So, I'm going to say that we are probably done. So, I will tell you that Mike, Dwayne, Lewis, Jesse, Chance, Charles, George, Terry, David, and Jesse are all going to get credit for this class in Growing You. So when someone looks at your record, they're going to see, oh, yes, they've had planner training. They completed planner training as they were supposed to. So I will make sure that gets changed in your Growing You record, and I will send you that information. And I appreciate those of you who stuck around. There were some people who kind of came and went. So I appreciate that you guys stuck around for the entire thing. And it's to your benefit because you'll get credit for it. So.
Thank you, Cheryl, for all your help.
Oh, no problem. I'm happy to help. That's what I'm here for. So, and if you guys have questions, let me just tell you, you can call me. My number, if you want to write it down, I prefer you call me on this number, 863-292-5626. That's actually my personal phone, but I have other phone forwarded to it, so I'd rather
What's
use
that
this.
number again, Cheryl?
863-292-5626.
Thank you.
And guys, don't be afraid to, ask the planners, that work there with you. If you have questions, some of you are going to be stepped up for them. So, don't be afraid to ask them a question because, it's their stuff. You're